Hello, Vlogalogue. How you doing? I'm doing pretty good, thanks for asking. I'm going to assume that you asked how I was doing at that point, because otherwise I'll feel like an idiot. Anyway, so we had some interesting discussions about Vlogalogue, on Vlogalogue, about communications in this last week. The most interesting one I wanted to pick out was actually from Kevin. So, he mentioned that, unless someone reads your journal, or you read your journal, or unless someone watches your video and not even engages with it, but unless they watch it, that is not form of communication. Which that's what I pulled out of that little bit, and I'm not sure I agree with that. I think it kind of boils down to the age-old saying: if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, doesn't make a noise. Well, I would say yes. Like going out in the middle of nowhere and shouting your problems to the void, I would say it's still a form of communication. It's a communication with yourself, and not necessarily communication with other people, which I guess could be what you were trying to say, Kevin. But I don't know. I still feel like that's communication. And then, of course, Luke talked about texting and being understood, and Niall talked about video games because it's Niall and he likes video games. And Jocelyn brought up a very interesting point that I'd like to revisit next week, actually, about overlapping forms of communication, like lulls in conversations leading to the appearance of phones. And I think we'll save that conversation for next Friday, and I'll explain more then. But anyway, for this Friday, well, actually Saturday, let's talk about parks, because I live across from a park. And actually, we're not actually going to be talking about parks. We're going to be talking about the occupants of parks. Mostly jungle gyms and stuff like that. I'm talking about the nation's and the world's children, because there's an interesting thing I noticed today, and that we really like to say everyone has to vaccinate their children all the time, because that is the entirely intelligent thing to do, because it's obvious. But we have a problem here, at least a huge problem in America, and it's also a problem other places in the world, at least from a cursory search that I did before recording this video, of obesity. And so we'll take, we have social protective services here in America, and I would assume in the UK as well, that will come and take your children away from you if you're causing them harm. Like, you're not feeding them enough, or you're beating them, or any sort of number of reasons. But I can't really find any instances of children being taken away from their families for obesity problems. At least, again, nothing in the cursory search. And I guess my question is, does that make sense? Would it make sense to take a child away for obesity? Because we take them away for lots of other problems that could cause long-term damage to the child, but that's not one of them. Weight is something that I know both myself and Kevin have struggled with and are still currently struggling with. I don't know about the other members of the Vlogalogue crew. They may like to enlighten us, maybe they won't, maybe it's too personal, I don't know. I myself managed to just weigh myself a few days ago at some number that was not actually overweight by the BMI scale here in America, which was pretty cool, but I mean, it was definitely a low point in sort of the graphic. Trends down, but goes up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. It's kind of frustrating sometimes. But it was an exciting milestone. Interestingly, I think it boils down to a reason that is somewhat selfish, because unvaccinated children who are unvaccinated by choice could contaminate unvaccinated children who simply can't afford the medicine. And they'll keep the disease around longer. It can't go extinct because it still has viable hosts. And if it's still around, you still have to vaccinate everyone, because otherwise the protection just works and doesn't work, and the disease just keeps going forever. So I think, I almost want to say it's a selfish reason that we don't seem to care as much about obesity in America and in other places as we do vaccinations, even though it could be just as bad. In fact, there are far more cases of obese children than there are cases of children who weren't vaccinated and got rare diseases. And they have long-term health effects. Their lifespans are statistically shorter. They're cutting years off their lives. Now, true, they don't cut all the years off their lives like some rare diseases will, but nonetheless, the cumulative is still much more lives lost than, you know, a child dying, which is like tough to talk about, and maybe sounds insensitive, but it's kind of the reality, right? I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to talk down anti-vaccination stuff. I'm just trying to talk up the fact that I think it's weird that we don't seem to care about obesity, or at least not on anywhere near the same level, even though it's debatably a much, much, much worse problem. And ultimately, it may just boil down to the economics of the situation, in that it's very easy to get like low-quality processed foods that can contribute to obesity problems, and it's very much more expensive to buy like actual healthy foods. And so if you're raising a family of like 2 or 3 kids, and you both make minimum wage, or maybe you're a single parent, or whatever, you can't always afford to get what's healthy. And like food stamps don't really help a lot. Like food stamps are equivalent to like $30 per person per week. And that is not enough money to buy fruits and vegetables and healthy foods for your kids. It's just not. It's enough to feed them, sure, but it's going to be this processed stuff that can be very high in sugars and has been linked to obesity rates. And it's just not good. And there are arguments around what is actually considered a healthy weight, and what is good for the human body to experience, and what natural weight levels are. But I don't think anyone can deny that if you're actually technically classified as obese, and not just overweight, I think there's a very key distinction between those two. Like obesity is like the point where people realize that yes, you have a medical problem, and overweight is just like, yeah, you got a little bit of fat on you. You don't look like, according to our society, and perhaps there's a shift away from that, you don't look as attractive as you could be, which is of course an entirely separate topic that we may touch on at some point. Somewhere in there's a question, and I guess it boils down to, why don't we seem to care that much about obese children? Like, we care about any sort of other abuse towards a child, but not obesity. And I think it's weird, and at least nothing has made itself overly present to me in my life. Maybe I'm totally wrong and just ignorant, which I'm sure I am about some things, but I don't think it's this. But maybe I'll be proven wrong, which would be nice, but I don't think it would solve the hard facts I looked up about, like, how many children are obese. And yeah, it's a fun topic this week. Fun topic. I look forward to seeing what everyone does with it. Bye!